Gather round, children, no longer have to wait. There'll be fun and adventure all at story time with Cait. A world of imagination is there for you to take. All you gotta do is listen. It's story time with Cait. It's story time with Cait.
Hey boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Storytime with Cait. That's me. Well, I'm here out in Winnie the Pooh land, 100 Acre Woods. This is actually Winnie the Pooh's house. I know it's dark. It's actually completely terrifying out here, I'm not gonna lie. We do have glow sticks, so that's a plus, but I know you can't really see it. There are pots of honey back there, so that's kind of cool. I was gonna bring my own Winnie the Pooh out here, but somebody thought it might be dirty. Anyway, today I am going to be reading the second book of the Heath Cousins series. If you remember back to season 1, we read the Heath Cousins and the Moonstone Cave. This is the Heath Cousins and the Kingsgate Bridge, book 2 in the Heath Cousins series by Eileen Hobbs. If you want to pick up your very own copy of any of the Heath Cousins book, in particular Heath Cousins and the Kingsgate Bridge, all you have to do is go to Amazon.com. Only with your parents' permission, kids. And now, let's get to reading. Chapter 1, The Mysterious Letter. Addie B., whose whole and proper name was Adelaide Bennington Winifred Heath, after her grandparents on both sides of the family, sat looking out on the snow-covered town of Farnley, where she lived, anxiously awaiting the arrival of her cousins, Jack, Beanie, and Bodie. How things had changed, she thought. Before last summer, before their adventures in Maine at their grandfather's house, and before the Moonstone Cave, she would have dreaded their visit. But ever since finding Gemma, Jumani, and the beautiful Garden of Choice, the cousins had become closer than ever. Now it was her cousin's turn to come visit her here in England, to celebrate Christmas together. The timing was perfect, too, because in Addie's hand, she held the beginning of another adventure. Perhaps one that would take them back to that magical land once more. Addie opened the crinkled paper that she had been holding tightly in her hand. She didn't need to read it again because she knew it by heart. But it made her heart pound with excitement to see the strange Chinese writing. One word stood out to her. It meant danger. She smoothed the letter out on her lap. The colorful twinkling lights on their Christmas tree shone on the paper, creating mysterious shadows. When she had first received the letter 2 weeks ago, she thought it had been a mistake. Yes, it had her name on it. But the return address had only Chinese writing. When she opened it, the first line made her heart flutter. It was the only line in English. It said, "Use the ring to understand." Addie knew right away what ring the letter was referring to. More book. It was the Moonstone Ring, the one she had found in the Moonstone Cave last summer. The ring gave her the ability to translate other languages into English. She had immediately gone to her room and brought out the treasure box her Grandma Winnie had given her. There, among the precious items her grandma had kept, a pressed rose, a bright blue feather, a small locket with the letter W on it, and the poem that led them on their first journey, was the Moonstone Ring. It still shone like a pale pink shell. She had not put it on since last summer. There had been no need. But when she got the letter from China, she had slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, just like the last time. With the Moonstone Ring on her finger, she had gone back to the letter. Magically, just like before, the Chinese characters smoothed into words she could understand. "Dear Adelaide," she read, "you don't know me, but my name is Mai Ling. I live in a small village in China. One day, I was walking home from school and went through a park when suddenly an old wooden door appeared in front of me. On the door was written a famous Chinese proverb. It said, 'The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.' Of course, I was so curious. I had never seen the door before, but I opened it and found myself in a beautiful walled garden. There, I met a lovely woman named Gemma and her white wolf, Jumani. I had a lovely adventure, which I will tell you about one day. But before I left, Gemma gave me an urgent message to give you. She said, "Tell Adelaide and her cousins that they need to return right away. I'm in danger." When Adelaide read that line, her heart sank. Gemma had been so kind to them, and her wolf, Jumani, had fought another dark gray wolf to save their lives, and now she needed their help. What could possibly be wrong? She had finished the letter, her hands trembling. Gemma said there is another entrance to the Garden of Choice in your town, under a bridge. She said you would know it. Miley was right. There was an old stone bridge called Kingsgate Bridge near Farnley Castle on the edge of their town. The bridge crossed a small, shallow river. Addie had walked over it 100 times. She never knew there was a secret entrance to the Garden of Choice so close to her. A lot of bugs out here. I hope to meet you someday. Miley's letter ended. Good luck. I hope you can help Gemma. I hope so too, Addie had thought. Get here quickly, cousins, she whispered to herself, before it's too late. Chapter 2. The Reunion. Jack and his younger brothers, Beanie and Bodie, looked excitedly out on the gray English countryside from the train window. It had stopped snowing, but red brick cottages covered in white blankets of snow sped by like in a movie. Beanie and Bodie were practicing their English accents. I have an English accent. But Jack sat quietly, thinking about Addie's phone call 2 weeks ago. Jack, she had said worriedly, Gemma needs our help. Bring your stones and Bodie's marble, but don't tell them anything yet. Jack reached up and fingered the dark onyx stone around his neck. Gemma had made it for him when they met her in the magical Garden of Choice. She had made a beautiful red stone for Beanie that had special healing powers, and a tiger's eye stone for Bodie that gave him wisdom. She had called Jack the Protector. He had done his best to keep all of them safe on that wonderful but terrifying adventure. And now they might go back? He couldn't believe it. In fact, since they had returned, he still thought of it as a dream. What are you talking about? He had asked Addie, thinking she was teasing him. She had sometimes acted a little snooty still, he thought, using proper English words like actually and correcting them about their word usage. Ain't is not proper English, she would say. In spite of her faults, Addie was very smart, and he knew she would not lie about such an important matter. She is too. She is not. Jack turned to focus on his 9-year-old and 6-year-old brothers, who had gone from speaking in British accents to fighting about something. No one would guess they were all brothers. Bodie, the youngest, was blonde and blue-eyed. Beanie had bright red hair that stuck up like he had just rolled out of bed, and Jack was dark-haired and tan. Jack had inherited the dark, good looks of his grandmother Winnie's Native American heritage. Be quiet, he whispered loudly. People are sleeping. What's the matter? We're talking about Addie B, Bodie said. His bright blue eyes were opened wide, and his blonde hair stuck out in odd angles. She's British, right? No, goofball, Beanie said, giving his younger brother a shove. She's American. They just live here. Then how come she talks so funny? Bodie asked. Hello, Mum. Want a spot of tea? I've been practicing that. Bodie grinned, trying out his best imitation of their cousin. Jack decided to intervene. He didn't want to wake his parents, who had fallen asleep in their seats across the aisle. She's lived here for 4 years, Jack said calmly, so she's picked up the accent. This seemed to calm Bodie. How much longer? Jack glanced at his watch. It's an hour train ride from London, he said. About another half an hour. It's so long, Bodie groaned, yawning. First that long plane ride, now a long train ride. Bodie slumped over, resting his head in his backpack. The jet lag was finally getting to him, Jack thought. Beanie leaned closer to Jack. Do you remember last summer? He asked. Jack nodded. Was it real? I mean, Gemma and Jumani? The Moonstone Cave? Jack thought for a minute about how to answer. It was real to us, he said finally. I'm not sure why or how, but it was definitely real for us. Do you think we'll ever go back? Beanie asked, looking intently at his dark-haired older brother. This is truly terrible. Just kidding. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe one day. Jack looked out the window. There were no more cottages now, just lush green fields dotted with snow and an occasional church spire rising up in the distance. How could he tell Bodie and Beanie that in the next day or two they might be back in that land they had left what seemed like a lifetime ago? A few minutes later, the train began to slow. Jack heard the squealing of the brakes, and then he saw the sign flash by that said Farnley. They were here at last. He caught sight of Aunt Lil and Uncle Simon on the platform of the station, waving happily. Next to them was Addie. She looked the same, light brown hair brushing her shoulders. She wore a dark coat to her knees, a wool cap, and white fluffy gloves. But she was smiling and waving, unlike last summer when they were together with their grandfather in Maine. Their journey to the Moonstone Cave together had changed all that. Now he was proud to call her his cousin, and he knew that no matter what, it would be a Christmas to remember. Addie B, Bodie cried excitedly. He was the first one to hop down the train stairs. He flung himself into Addie's arms, almost knocking her over. You've grown, Bodie. You're getting taller. Bodie beamed at her words. Beanie hung back, merely raising his hand at Addie. He was too old to hug his cousin. Addie waved back and then smiled at Jack. The queen in her castle, he said. His words warmed her. Ever since their journey through Moonstone Cave, he had called her Queen Addie. She was so glad he remembered. Looking up at his tall, slender frame, she was struck again by how much he looked like her Grandma Winnie. His hair was black like hers had been, and his dark brown eyes were like marbles. He was so handsome, she thought again. You've grown too, she said. They didn't hug, but walked together side by side out of the station. You haven't, he laughed. She punched him gently in the arm. Tell me what's going on. Tell me about the letter, he whispered excitedly to her. Not now, she said, linking her arm through his. There's plenty of time for that. And tomorrow we'll take a walk to the bridge. Who knows? It may be the start of a whole new adventure. It was dark now and had begun to snow again. Big white flakes fell softly all around them. The lights of Addie's beautiful English village sparkled like a magical dreamland. That night, at Addie's house, after a wonderful warm cup of hot chocolate, Addie and Jack sat near the Christmas tree whispering about the letter from Miley. Bodie and Beanie were sprawled out on the floor in their sleeping bags, sound asleep. Their parents had gone to bed over an hour ago. Let me see the letter, Jack said. Addie carefully handed the crinkled envelope to Jack. He opened it and frowned at the strange Chinese script. What do you think's wrong with Gemma? Jack asked. I thought Jumani would protect her from anything like he did us. Addie nodded in agreement. Her freckled face looked so serious and concerned in the twinkling lights of the tree. I don't know, but we have to find out, Jack. We have to try and help her. Jack stared quietly out the window at the soft, ghostly flakes floating down from the dark sky. It was beautiful, but he was so glad to be inside, sitting next to the warm, crackling fire. Why us, Addie? He asked. I mean, there are other wanderers who go there, like Miley. Why did she ask for us? Addie smiled at Jack's use of the word wanderers. That was what Gemma had called them, when they had first entered the Garden of Choice. I don't know. Maybe, and this sounds really weird, but you know how Gemma reminded us of a young Grandma Winnie? Jack nodded. Well, maybe it has something to do with that. You mean Gemma is Grandma Winnie? Just in a different place? A different body? Nailed it. Addie was silent. It sounded so crazy. Grandma Winnie had died almost 2 years ago. Was it possible that when you left this world, you went on to another? I don't know, Addie finally said. I just know we have to try and help her. Jack agreed. "Tomorrow then," he said, yawning and sliding into his sleeping bag. "I'm beat, Queen Addie. If I have to fight any fierce creatures tomorrow, I need my rest." Addie laughed, thinking of how brave Jack had been to fight the gray wolf with the sword he had found in the Garden of Choice. She hoped he wouldn't have to do that again. "Good night, cuz," she said, drawing out the word cuz in a long southern drawl instead of the short, clipped way she usually talked. But Jack's dark brown eyes had already closed, and he was snoring softly, already lost in dreamland. "Sweet dreams," she whispered before she got up to go to her own comfortable bed. She stood and looked at her cousins. In spite of Gemma's dire message, she was so happy to see them all again. Another adventure awaits us, she thought. She sincerely hoped they were ready for it. Chapter 3. Kingsgate Bridge. The next morning, Bodie Heath was the first to wake up. He scrambled out of his sleeping bag and went to the window. The snow on the cobblestone streets outside of Addie B's house looked like a thin coating of ice cream. Across the narrow street, other brick houses similar to Addie's lined the street. He could see the twinkling lights of their Christmas trees reflected in the windows. 2 more days to Christmas, he thought. And then he wondered, he must ask Addie B something. He tiptoed between his brothers, who were still asleep on the floor, and went down the hallway toward Addie's room. He knocked softly. There was no answer, so he peeked in and walked quietly to Addie's bed. She lay curled around Lady Anne, the doll that Grandma Winnie had made her when she was born. "Addie B," he whispered loudly. "Are you awake?" Addie opened her green eyes and frowned at her youngest cousin. "Bodie," she groaned. "What time is it?" Addie rolled over and rubbed her eyes. "I don't know," Bodie said, "but I have something important to ask you." "Okay," Addie said, "what is it?" "If we go, back there, where Gemma is, will we miss Christmas?" Addie looked at him blankly for a minute. At first, she did not know what he was talking about, but then she remembered. Last night, she had told her cousins about Miley's letter and the secret door at Kingsgate Bridge. "No," Addie said. "Remember the last time we went, Bodie? In Gemma's world, it had been 2 days. But when we came back here, hardly any time had passed." Bodie looked so relieved. "Oh, good," he said. "I didn't want Santa to skip us or anything." Addie reached out and ruffled her cousin's blonde hair, which was already sticking straight up from his sleep. It's in the book now. "Santa won't miss us," she reassured him. Satisfied, Bodie went bounding out of her room. Addie lay awake, staring out at the gray sky, hugging her doll closely. This would be their second Christmas without her beautiful grandmother. But Gemma, whom they had met last summer in the Garden of Choice, reminded all of them of a young Grandma Winnie with her long, flowing black hair decorated with feathers and flowers. Addie couldn't wait to go back. Now, Gemma needed them, and they couldn't let her down. After breakfast, she convinced her father to take them on a sightseeing trip to Farnley Castle, which was on the edge of their village. She knew that Kingsgate Bridge was right outside the castle. While her parents were exploring the old ruins, surely they could sneak away and find the secret door. Fortunately, her parents and aunt and uncle thought it was a splendid idea. They all bundled up in their jackets, coats, gloves, and caps, and piled into her parents' minivan. She made sure that the boys all had their necklaces given to them by Gemma, and that Bodie had his magical marble, which could light up a dark tunnel or cave like a bright flashlight. And we could so use one of those right now. Of course, Addie wore her Moonstone Ring. "Addie," Bodie tugged on her coat before they left. "Do you have any crackers?" he asked, smiling. "Are you hungry already?" Addie asked. Bodie shook his head. "Remember?" he asked. "Jadira? Maybe we'll see him again." Addie understood. Jadira had been the large, woolly buffalo creature they had met on their last adventure. He had followed Bodie, sniffling at his pockets for a snack. It had been Jadira that had helped them move the giant boulders blocking their way home. Addie laughed. "I remember. Yes, we need some snacks for sure." She grabbed her backpack and quickly tossed in some crackers, chocolate, and a bottle of water. She had no idea what else they might need. This would have to be enough for now. 20 minutes later, they were driving on the outskirts of town, and in the distance, they could see the stone ruins of Farnley's castle. Addie's father was giving them some history about the castle. It was built in the 1100s, he said, pointing to the entrance, where a small arched gate was set between two towers. A white flag with red markings sat on the top of the towers, waving in the wind. Many of the monarchs of England, like King John and Queen Victoria, visited this castle. That tower is called a keep, he went on, motioning to a large structure rising up in the middle of the castle. If the castle was attacked, the king and queen would go there to be protected. Addie suddenly poked Jack in the ribs. "Look," she whispered, "it's Kingsgate Bridge." Jack stretched up to see the medieval bridge just ahead of them. It was made of stone and had 3 arches in it. Underneath the bridge, a clear, shallow stream flowed through the middle opening. After they crossed the bridge, they parked at the entrance to the castle. Addie quickly came up with a plan. "Mom and Dad," she said as they piled out of the van, "I think we'll explore around the outside while you guys go in." Her father, who had continued to discuss the history of the castle, nodded, and off they went inside the small arched entrance. "Come on," Addie said to her cousins. They began to run back towards the bridge, only a short distance away from the castle. "Which side of the bridge is the door?" Beanie asked. He already had the old, rusted key he had found in the Moonstone cave ready to try in the door. "I don't know," Addie said, scrambling down the side of the embankment. "Let's check." The cousins followed her underneath the bridge. Where they stood was dry. The small river was a few feet away. Addie stepped up and began to feel the stone on the underneath of the first arch. "Nothing here," she said. She heard a splash and turned to see Beanie running through the shallow water to the wall of the second arch. "Beanie," she cried, "you'll freeze." But Beanie ignored her. "I found it," he yelled. "Come on." Jack, Addie, and Bodie crossed the few feet of water to the next arch. It was like walking through a bucket of ice, Addie thought. She pulled her coat tighter around her and slapped her gloved hands together to keep herself warm. And then she saw the door. It couldn't be seen from the road, but here, up close, she could see the outline of a curved entrance, complete with a rusted metal lock. "Are you sure this is it?" Jack asked. "Because it doesn't go anywhere. There isn't anything on the other side." Remember the Garden of Choice?" Beanie asked sarcastically. "There wasn't supposed to be anything on the other side of the cave either, but there sure was." Jack grinned. "Agreed," he said. Beanie had his large, ancient key ready to try in the door. His hand shook a little as he inserted it into the old metal knob. It turned easily and made a small clicking sound. The door began to ease open, creaking on its old hinges. "Here we go again," Bodie said, standing close to Addie. The door swung open fully. It was pitch black inside and completely silent. Addie felt a shiver go down her spine, and it wasn't from the cold outside. She knew once they stepped through the door, they would leave the comfortable and familiar home she knew and loved and enter another world, one where uncertainties and danger might be waiting for them. "Well," Jack said, "I guess we might as well go through." They all nodded and took their first steps into the darkened, mysterious space. Well, I hope you all enjoyed part 1 of what is going to be a multi-episode series. Man, I cannot wait to see what's on the other side of that door, and I really hope Gemma's okay. This is definitely intense. Thank you so much for watching Storytime with Cait. That's me! So I just want to show you guys this real quick. I know you can't really or couldn't really tell how dark it actually is out here with the lights and the glow sticks and everything, but check this out. This is the real deal. This is what we're dealing with. You ready? Can you see me? Can you guys see me? What's a pirate's favorite restaurant? Arby's. Alright, so I couldn't resist. I really wanted to show you guys this honey. So check it out. This is where me and my boy Winnie were chilling earlier. Got some, this is called, can't really see it. It's grape jelly, honey, excuse me, grape honey. This is just a plain old regular honey. And then this over here is strawberry honey. Different flavors of honey for Winnie the Pooh in Winnie the Pooh land. So, if you guys don't mind, I am actually going to get out of here now because I don't know where Pooh is. I think he's asleep. But I've been pretty much just out here by myself throughout this. Anyway, good night, everybody.